You owe me this. 4 words. Just 4 words that completely transformed the lives of thousands of men without them realizing what was happening. And the scariest part? Most don't even know they're being manipulated right now. There's a kind of violence that leaves no visible marks. There are no bruises, no screams the neighbors can hear, nothing a camera could capture. But it's happening right now in millions of relationships around the world. It's a silent, psychological, devastating violence. And it always starts with phrases that seem harmless. You've probably heard some of them. Maybe you've even normalized them. After all, society has taught us that love requires sacrifice, that relationships demand tolerance, that men must put up with certain things. But there's an invisible line between healthy tolerance and emotional imprisonment. And that line is crossed every day through carefully chosen words that work like psychological handcuffs. What I'm going to reveal here is not relationship theory. It's not generic self-help. It's the precise anatomy of how emotional manipulation operates inside relationships that look normal from the outside but are psychological minefields on the inside. We're talking about 6 specific phrases that aren't just common red flags. They're definitive proof that something is deeply broken in the moral and psychological structure of the relationship. These phrases all have something in common. They all turn love into a tool of control. They all convert affection into currency. They all reduce you from a partner to an exploitable resource. And the most dangerous part? They work because they appeal to your noblest instincts, your desire to be good, to prove your love, to not give up on the one you love. The first phrase we need to dissect is precisely the one that opens this text: you owe me. 3 words that carry a chemical toxicity capable of completely poisoning the dynamics of a relationship. Because when someone says you owe them something in a loving context, that person isn't making a request. They're presenting an invoice. They're charging you. They're turning every gesture of affection you've shown in the past into credit that must now be repaid with interest. Healthy love doesn't operate on a debit and credit system. When you do something for someone you love, you're not creating a future debt, you're expressing feeling. But for those who use this phrase, every dinner you paid for, every gift you gave, every night you stayed up consoling, every sacrifice you made, all of it becomes ammunition. Ammunition to make you do what you don't want to accept what you shouldn't, to keep giving even when you're already empty. And here's the cruel detail: that phrase is never used to ask for reasonable things. No one says you owe me to ask for a hug or an honest conversation. That phrase appears when the person wants you to cross your boundaries, to violate your own values, to do something your conscience rejects. It arises as a last manipulative resort when normal arguments no longer work. What makes this especially destructive is that the phrase completely inverts the logic of love. Instead of 2 free individuals choosing to be together, a creditor-debtor relationship is created. You stop being a partner and become a servant with debts to pay. Every no you say becomes an insult, an act of ingratitude, proof that you don't value what was done for you. And so, slowly, you lose your ability to set boundaries. The second phrase operates on the opposite spectrum but carries identical toxicity: I don't owe you anything. While the first phrase traps you in eternal debt, this one completely discards you. It communicates something brutal: your feelings don't matter, your needs are irrelevant, your expectations are your problem. This phrase is the emotional equivalent of a door slammed in your face. What this phrase really means is, I can do whatever I want, and you have no right to feel bad about it. It's the absolute refusal of emotional responsibility. It's the declaration that the person reserves the right to hurt you without consequence, to disrespect you without explanation, to act with pure selfishness and still expect you not to complain. Healthy relationships recognize emotional interdependence. When you love someone, there is an implicit responsibility to care for the heart that opened itself to you. It's not a legal obligation, it's an emotional commitment. But those who use this phrase reject any commitment while still wanting all the benefits of having you around. And notice the pattern starting to form. These phrases always serve a dual purpose. They both control you and absolve the other person of responsibility. You owe me traps you. I don't owe you anything frees the other person from accountability. It's a game you can only lose. The third phrase is even more insidious because it disguises itself as social commentary: all men are trash. It might sound like mere venting, generalized frustration, maybe even an attempt at dark humor. But when this phrase is said repeatedly within a relationship, it works as a slow-release poison. What this phrase does is make you guilty simply for existing as a man. You don't have to have done anything wrong. Your guilt is chromosomal. It's inherent. You carry the collective guilt of all men who've ever existed. And that means you can never be on equal footing in that relationship. You always start by owing apologies. Always start having to prove you're different. Always start at a moral disadvantage. This kind of destructive generalization creates an impossible dynamic. You're treated as a representative of an entire group instead of being seen as an individual. Your mistakes confirm the stereotype. Your achievements are exceptions that don't change the rule. You fight ghosts of past relationships, pay for crimes you didn't commit, carry responsibility for the actions of strangers. And here's the real damage. This phrase systematically erodes your self-esteem. Because if all men are trash, and you're a man, then you're trash too. And if you're trash, then you should be grateful that someone accepts you despite being trash. You should tolerate any treatment because, after all, you don't deserve better. It's a psychological downgrading that conditions you to accept emotional crumbs as if they were banquets. If you followed along and recognize patterns you've lived or are living, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. What comes next will reveal the remaining 3 phrases that complete this arsenal of manipulation, and how they work together to create a control system almost impossible to escape without external help. The 4th phrase is one of the most effective manipulative tools ever invented: I'm just a woman, or I'm just a girl. This phrase is presented as fragility but functions as a bulletproof shield against responsibility. It's strategic infantilization. It's the conscious choice to pose as incapable precisely in moments when responsibility would otherwise be demanded. Notice when this phrase appears. Never in moments of achievement or success. No one says, I'm just a woman, when they get a promotion or close an important deal. This phrase surfaces precisely when there's a mistake to acknowledge, an apology to make, or a consequence to face. It's the adult equivalent of a child saying, I didn't know while fully knowing. What makes this particularly manipulative is that it uses the very fight against gender stereotypes as a tool of manipulation. It reinforces the idea of female fragility precisely to avoid accountability. And it puts you in an impossible position. If you demand responsibility, you can be accused of being cruel to someone fragile. If you accept the excuse, you reinforce a cycle of irresponsibility. Adult relationships require both parties to be capable of taking responsibility for their actions. When someone consistently hides behind supposed gender-based fragility to avoid consequences, that person isn't seeking partnership. They're seeking a substitute father who tolerates tantrums and irresponsibility while they enjoy the privileges of being treated as an adult when convenient. The 5th phrase is perhaps the most recognizable and the most universally devastating. If you loved me, you'd do it. This phrase is emotional blackmail in its purest, most distilled form. It's the transformation of love into proof, of feeling into a test you must constantly pass. And the cruelest part? You always fail. The mechanism of this phrase is diabolical in its simplicity. It takes your most genuine feeling, your real love for the person, and turns it into a weapon against you. You love them? Then prove it. But the proof is never reasonable. It's never something you are already willing to do. The proof always requires that you cross your own boundaries, violate your values, do what your conscience rejects. True love never demands proof through self-destruction. When someone truly loves you, that person respects your limits precisely because they love you. They don't want you to hurt yourself to prove anything. But those who use this phrase aren't interested in reciprocal love. They're interested in obedience disguised as devotion. And notice the escalation pattern. At first, the requests may even seem small. If you loved me, you'd cancel that plan. Then it grows. If you loved me, you wouldn't go out with your friends. Then it explodes. If you loved me, you'd quit your job. Each concession you make doesn't satisfy. It only increases the appetite for more control. Because what's being tested isn't the intensity of your love, it's the limit of your submission. This phrase also creates a perfect psychological trap. If you refuse, you're proving you don't love them. If you give in, you establish a precedent that this manipulation works, guaranteeing it will be used again. It's a game with no winning move. The only possible victory is not to play. What few people realize is that this phrase reveals something fundamental about the person who uses it. That person doesn't believe in real love. They don't trust, they don't feel secure, they can't accept affection without turning it into a test. And no amount of proof you give will change that. Because the problem isn't the insufficiency of your love, it's their inability to receive love without distorting it. The sixth and final phrase closes the cycle of control masterfully, then leave. It sounds like the opposite of manipulation, it even sounds like liberation. But it's the most sophisticated control tool of all. It's a threat disguised as permission. It's the emotional equivalent of someone putting a gun in your hand and saying you're free to shoot, knowing you never will. This phrase works because it transfers all responsibility for ending the relationship onto you. If you stay, it's because you chose to tolerate it. If you leave, it's because you didn't love enough. In both scenarios, the other person keeps the moral high ground. They're never the villain. You're always the one who abandoned or didn't have the courage to go. But the true power of this phrase lies in repetition. It's not said once. It's said constantly, during every conflict, every disagreement, every moment you try to set a boundary. It becomes a threatening mantra that hangs over the relationship like a suspended guillotine. You live knowing that at any moment, the blade might fall. And here's the refined cruelty: this phrase bets on your goodness. It bets that you're afraid to hurt, afraid to abandon, afraid to be the one who gives up. It uses your very character against you. The more loyal you are, the more trapped you become. The more committed you are to making it work, the more hostage you become to this constant threat. What this phrase really communicates is, I can treat you however I want because I know you won't leave. It's a bet on your emotional dependence, your fear of loneliness, your investment of time and energy in this relationship. It's cold calculation disguised as detachment. Now that we've mapped all 6 phrases, we need to understand how they work together. Because the real destructive power isn't in any single phrase, it's in the system they create when combined. It's like building a cage with 6 different bars, each one blocking a specific exit. You owe me traps you through manufactured guilt. I don't owe you anything removes your right to complain. All men are trash lowers your self-esteem so you'll accept scraps. I'm just a woman absolves the other person of responsibility. If you loved me, turns your affection into a tool of control. Then leave imprisons you through fear of being the one who gives up. Together, these phrases create an alternate reality where you're simultaneously an eternal debtor and deserving of nothing. Where you must constantly prove your love but can never expect reciprocity. Where you carry responsibility for everything while the other person answers for nothing. It's the psychological architecture of emotional imprisonment. And the scariest part is that this system reinforces itself. Every time you tolerate one of these phrases, you teach that it works. Every time you give in to the blackmail, you confirm its effectiveness. Every time you stay after hearing, then leave, you validate the bet that you'll never actually have the courage to go. What keeps someone trapped isn't lack of awareness. Most victims know on some level that something is wrong. What keeps them trapped is the toxic combination of hope, emotional investment, and fear. Hope that the person will change. Investment of years that feels wasted if it ends. Fear of starting over, of being alone, of confirming failure. There is a specific moment in the trajectory of this kind of relationship that is simultaneously the lowest and the most revealing point. It's when you realize you've completely lost the ability to recognize yourself. You look in the mirror and see a stranger who carries your face but not your essence. Someone who accepts treatment that once would have been unthinkable. Someone who justifies the unjustifiable. This moment usually arrives suddenly, but it's the result of gradual erosion. Like water-piercing stone, drop by drop, until one day the stone simply collapses. You've spent months, maybe years, giving away small pieces of yourself. First came the friends who caused jealousy. Then the hobbies that took time away from the relationship. Then the opinions that caused conflict. Until you became an edited, censored, diminished version of who you once were. What few people understand is that toxic relationships don't destroy you all at once. They consume you in installments. Every time you hear one of those 6 phrases and choose to tolerate it, you lose a fragment of self-esteem. Every time you prove your love through self-destruction, you teach your brain that your worth depends on someone else's acceptance. Every threat of abandonment you survive makes you more dependent, not stronger. And then something happens that should be alarming but has become routine. You start anticipating the manipulation. You learn to read the signs, to feel when one of those phrases is coming. And instead of preparing to resist, you prepare to give in. Your instinct for self-preservation has been reprogrammed to serve the preservation of the relationship, not of yourself. The most painful truth is that this kind of dynamic appeals specifically to your most noble qualities. If you were selfish, you would have left at the first sign. If you were cruel, you wouldn't care about the pain your leaving would cause. If you were superficial, you wouldn't have invested so much trying to make it work. Your kindness, your loyalty, your commitment, all of it has been turned into chains. There is a stage in this process that psychologists call extreme cognitive dissonance. It's when your mind tries to reconcile two incompatible realities. On one side, you know you're being mistreated. You know that no true love operates through blackmail and contempt. On the other, you've invested so much, promised so much, believe so strongly that you can fix it, that your brain literally distorts reality to make everything seem less serious than it is. You start creating alternative narratives. She only acts like this because she's hurt. He had a tough childhood. If I'm more patient, more understanding, more available, everything will get better. You become the defense attorney for your own abuser, building elaborate justifications for what has no justification. The breaking point usually doesn't come from a big event. It comes from a small moment of clarity. It could be seeing a couple laughing together and realizing you've forgotten what lightness feels like. It could be a friend commenting on how much you've changed and suddenly seeing yourself through someone else's eyes. It could be simply waking up one day and feeling you can't bear the weight of trying to be enough for someone who has decided you'll never be. But even when clarity arrives, leaving still feels impossible. Because those 6 phrases don't just control you in the present, they program your future. You owe me creates guilt in advance for leaving. I don't owe you anything ensures you won't expect support during the transition. All men are trash plants the belief that you don't deserve anything better. I'm just a woman makes you feel cruel for abandoning someone fragile. If you loved me, turns your departure into proof of lovelessness. Then leave makes you feel like you're the coward who gave up. The manipulation has gone so deep that even after recognizing everything, you still feel that maybe you're the problem. Maybe you're exaggerating. Maybe you're too sensitive. Maybe you really didn't try hard enough. That constant doubt is the final mechanism of control, installed so deeply that it works even in the person's absence. There's something particularly cruel in how society reinforces this imprisonment. Romantic movies celebrate toxic persistence as proof of true love. Songs treat possessive jealousy as intense passion. Social media turns problematic relationships into entertainment content. And so you're not only fighting the internal manipulation of the relationship, but an entire culture that romanticizes exactly what's destroying you. The most dangerous moment isn't when you're completely broken. It's when you start to recover a little and the other person notices. Because then comes the reconciliation cycle. Suddenly, after months of coldness, gestures of affection appear. After weeks of criticism, come compliments. After days of threats, the adorable version of the person you fell in love with re-emerges. And you want so badly to believe the change is real that you ignore the fact that this pattern has already repeated dozens of times. The truth no one wants to hear, but everyone needs to understand, is this: there is no therapy, no conversation, no sacrifice, and no amount of love that can fix a relationship built on contempt. When someone uses these 6 phrases consistently, they're not making communication mistakes, they're revealing character. And character doesn't change because you beg. It doesn't transform because you sacrifice. It doesn't evolve because you endure. The first step to escaping this emotional prison is to name what's happening. It's not complicated love. It's not a relationship with ups and downs. It's not a rough phase that will pass. It's systematic psychological abuse. And calling it by its right name breaks the spell of denial. You can't heal what you refuse to diagnose. But naming it is only the beginning. The hardest part is accepting that you cannot save someone who doesn't want to be saved. You cannot love someone into changing. You cannot sacrifice yourself until reciprocity appears. You cannot prove your worth to someone who has decided you have none. Carrying that impossible responsibility only leads to your own destruction. The decision to leave is not abandonment, it's rescue. You're not giving up on true love, you're rejecting a toxic imitation disguised as love. You're not weak for not being able to endure it anymore. You're strong enough to recognize that endurance is not a virtue when what you're enduring is killing you from the inside. And here's something no one tells you: when you finally leave, the first thing you feel isn't relief, it's terror. Because you've spent so long being defined by that relationship that you no longer know who you are without it. You built your entire routine, your decisions, even your thoughts around pleasing, avoiding conflict, maintaining peace. Now you have to learn how to exist without that script. The first days are the most brutal. You'll question your decision 1,000 times. You'll remember the good moments with cinematic clarity, while the bad ones will seem blurry. Your brain, trained to justify, will create elaborate arguments for why you should go back. That doesn't mean you made a mistake. It means you're experiencing emotional withdrawal from a relationship that functioned like a drug. But if you resist, something extraordinary begins to happen. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, you start to remember who you were before. Not the person you became during the relationship, that edited and diminished version. You begin to recover pieces of yourself that were buried. You discover you can make decisions without needing approval. That you can have opinions without fearing conflict. That you can say no without exhaustive justification. Every small recovery of autonomy is a monumental victory. Every day you resist the temptation to go back is proof that you are stronger than the manipulation was effective. The most important lesson that emerges from this process is brutal in its simplicity. Love cannot exist where contempt is the foundation. You can have attraction, shared history, even moments of tenderness between explosions of cruelty. But you don't have love. Because true love honors, respects, values. True love does not operate through emotional blackmail and systematic degradation. And once you understand this viscerally, not just intellectually, you develop a new filter of perception. You begin to recognize those 6 phrases the first time they appear, not the 100th. You identify patterns of manipulation in their early stages, not when you're already completely entangled. You learn that leaving early isn't giving up easily, it's having the wisdom not to invest in a doomed structure. Rebuilding is not linear. There will be days when you feel strong and days when you doubt again. There will be moments of absolute clarity and moments of confused nostalgia. That's normal. Healing doesn't mean the absence of pain, it means an increasing ability to process pain without letting it redefine you. What you need to understand is that every time someone treated you as an exploitable resource instead of a valued partner, that person was doing you an involuntary favor. They were showing you exactly who they are. When someone says, "You owe me," believe them. Believe that this person sees relationships as transactions. When someone says, "I don't owe you anything," believe that they truly don't feel responsible for respecting you. People show you who they are, you just need to stop rewriting the narrative in your head. The version of you that emerges on the other side of this experience is different. More cautious, perhaps. Less naive, certainly. But also more aware of your own worth, more firm in your boundaries, more capable of recognizing when something isn't right. You've traded innocence for wisdom. And while innocence is beautiful, wisdom is what keeps you whole. If this content resonated with you, if you recognized patterns you've lived or are living, subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Because the biggest trap of emotional manipulation is isolation. The more you keep it secret, the more power it has. The more you speak about it, the weaker the control these dynamics have over you.